can also look at some reconfiguration of that mall depending on the amount of space that's provided. There is a restriction on food space in that development, other than the grocery store, the Zayres, and that is still subject to a retail market impact study.
Well, at one time, I remember that the reason that Walmart went to the downtown was that they wouldn't be able to expand to a grocery store until about, I believe that the studies that were done said it would take till about 2015, 2016 before they could have a grocery component. So now you're saying we'll never have it. I don't know how. I understand that Tillsonburg wants to protect it, and I don't have any problem with that. But we should also have some rights that says we should be able to put a bigger Walmart there. Because I have to look at Norfolk, not Tillsonburg.
Mr. Chair, for the Norfolk Mall, the requirements for the food store or food component of the Walmart store was 3,020 meters, which is just over 30,000 square feet. And there's two tests for it. It could happen after January 1st, 2016, which has come by. And the second test is a satisfactory market assessment. As far as I know, that hasn't been done yet. But if that, and that was put in place because of the impact or the potential impact on existing grocery stores in Tillsonburg, and they were afraid that one of them might close, and this would allow sufficient time for them to, for the market to grow and to accommodate more floor space for food.
I understand that, but if Walmart would to take their component to Norfolk, they wouldn't have an impact, any more impact than they have today. But anyway, that, I guess, I'm not sure you've answered my question, but if there was such a thing that they wanted to, and they wanted to do all the studies that needed to be done, could it possibly happen? Let's put it that way.
Mr. Chair, yes, it can possibly happen.
Okay, thank you very much. I need a mover for this. Councillor Oliver has moved that the 5-year official plan, we need to deal with the farm split size. Are we doing that separately, or we'll do it all as one?
Okay. Chairman, I'd move that we separate that motion. So
okay.
We just deal with the commercial component, and then once that's
okay.
dealt with, then deal with the farm component.
Sorry, Councillor Oliver. Yeah, Councillor Oliver. Sorry, are you okay with that we separate them? Okay. So I'll let you read the first part of that then, I guess. We're dealing just with the retail component, right?
Through the chair to committee, that the 5-year official plan, outstanding issues and recommendations report, retail market studies, and farm split parcel sizes staff report DCS 1741 be received as information, in that public input has been received and considered as part of this decision, in that retail market studies continue to be used with new development applications for reasons set out in DCS 1741.
And that is that correct? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's certainly fine. I agree with my colleague about splitting, but have we dealt with the matter of expanding the Port Rowan downtown and commercial? It's in the same report. And there were recommendations. When will that come up in our discussion?
Matt, you want to talk about that?
I should have mentioned that, Mr. Chair. The Councillor Haight, when we discussed this in the issues and options report, suggested that we were expanding the Port Rowan downtown, but he suggested going further up Bay Street, and we took that into consideration, and we have expanded the downtown designation, several properties further to the north. And also recommending that a number of commercial developments further up Bay Street be recognized as a commercial designation in the official plan, and to take into account existing developments that are in that area. And that is part of the draft official plan amendment that is before council at this time.
Okay. Councilor Columbus.
With that change, more properties going to commercial, does that affect their property taxes in any way if it's designated commercial versus residential? And would the people be made aware that this change is taking place that own those properties?
Through the chair, I was going to suggest that those properties are currently used in commercial endeavors, so the Property Assessment Corporation is probably already taxing them at a commercial rate, even though they don't have that commercial designation.
Okay, now you've heard the motion that we're going to deal with, and then we'll deal with the farm splits. All those in favor? Okay, and let's move on to farm split parcel size. Who's got that one? You?
So the second outstanding issue was the minimum farm size and what was recommended in the final issues and options report. There had been some work done by staff, and so we suggested and council agreed to defer giving direction on that issue until we could come back to you. So what I've put in the report is the existing official plan policy and how that would be proposed to be changing, and then looked at the provincial policy statement. But I think most of interest that I wanted to speak with you tonight about is on page 5 of 8 of the actual report. I'm not sure what number that is in your agenda, but there was a background paper done for the 5-year official plan review, which was entitled Analyzing Farm Size and Farm Split Policy in the Agricultural Area. Over 60 comparable southwestern Ontario municipality policies were looked at, and what we found that over more than half of them had a 40 hectare or greater minimum parcel size, that the only ones that were smaller were ones that had designated specialty crop lands. So there were some in Niagara that had quite a smaller lot size, but it was because they were specialty crop lands. We also had learned from meeting with the province that the Lambton County and Essex County had both done different studies looking at the lot patterns that they had, the existing parcel sizes they had and what distributions they had, the types of farming operations, and other official plan policies in other municipalities. Both of those we found when we got copies of them recommended to continue with the 40 hectare size. So it was suggested to us that we take a look through our GIS staff to see what our parcel sizes were. And so we do have some maps included in the report, one that looked at the average size of farms by concession blocks, so we could get an idea whether or not there was, for example, maybe around Waterford, we might see that there were more smaller parcels because there's quite a bit of vegetable growing that goes on there, so that might be smaller parcels. We weren't sure. And maybe along the lakeshore there might be smaller pieces. We didn't know. But you can see by map 1 that there really isn't obviously something going on there. I mean, I could see a little bit, but it's really not overtly obvious. Map 2 was one where we took each parcel and looked at its size and said, what are we seeing here? And this is where we saw that there's a lot of 40 and 20 hectares, which would correspond to the original lot sizes, being that through lot and the concession, and maybe they've been split in half. But almost 30% of our agricultural parcels are smaller than 20 hectares, and just over 13 are larger than 40. So we have, as to be expected, very few that are really big, and quite a few that are very, very small. So in looking at what the other 2 municipalities had and in what was in the background report that had been done before, Staff is recommending that we continue to support the generally 40-hectare minimum lot size, which is in the plan now. And that's because we have a large supply of smaller agricultural parcels which provide options for new farmers. A minimum 40-hectare parcel does not unduly limit their options because there's quite a few choices in the smaller ones if they're starting out. There is recognized from some of the work that others have done that there is competition to purchase smaller farm parcels by non-farm interests. So we could, if we went with a smaller parcel size, see more of our farm properties being bought by people that are not going to farm them, they're not farmers. There is also an increased efficiency for farm operations with larger parcels. They can do more right there on that parcel rather than having to go to several separate ones that could be spread up and down the concession road. And when we start doing that sort of thing, there's travel between parcels that can increase the possibility of public safety concerns, and even for the farmer that creates issues in getting things out and on the road and traveling down the road. Larger farm parcels also allow for flexibility in changing farm types. For example, there's various types of crops or even to livestock. If you have a larger parcel, you have more options that you can do. And then we have few larger parcels, and if a farmer is wanting to farm those larger parcels, they should be protected that they can continue at that size. Then there is the large-scale mechanized production. So we know we've seen lots, particularly the last couple of weeks, we've been getting into working up the farm, and we see lots of the large tractors and equipment that is on the roads. So if you have a larger parcel, you can go in there and you can make the turns, you can do the work that you need to do. So with those things in mind, planning staff is recommended that we continue with the generally 40-hectare minimum lot size in our official plan. Open for questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does Norfolk County allow farm splits currently?
Yes, we do.
On average, how many of these do we do a year?
Through the chair, it's not a large number. It's smaller than other municipalities. I don't have the exact number. Pam's suggesting maybe 1 or 2 a year.
Okay, so are you splitting like 20-hectare farm or 200-hectare farms into two 100s? Is that what the farm split is?
We're splitting 80-hectare parcels into 40-hectare parcels.
Okay, so that's allowed, and those are the only ones that are allowed?
Through the chair, the policy goes on to say that if you are looking at parcels that are smaller than generally 40 hectares, here's the criteria. And so that's why I put that in here so that you can see what it says. And those are points I through VII on pages 4 and 8 of the report. So you can currently look at pieces that are smaller. One of the things I noticed in the Lambton policies is that they actually say if you're going to look at something smaller than the 40 hectares, you won't make a parcel any smaller than, and I don't remember whether they said 30 hectares or 40 or 20 hectares or what, but they actually put this is the smallest one, which I haven't put that in this report. I've left that out because you weren't questioning that.
Yeah, because I thought we talked about that before when we were trying to come up with the smaller parcel number, and that's what I thought when we had that discussion, that's what it was about, was the smaller number. Like, when I look at your graph here, I see that roughly 50% of the farms in Norfolk County are 26 hectares and smaller. Obviously, the smaller farms work for us in Norfolk County. We have great land, so it can really intensify things on the farm, and we're not doing the specialty crop thing, so your specialty growers have to go out and get larger farms, or I'm hearing there's pressure from the city. People want to come down and buy farms just to drive around on, not actually grow stuff. Well, it's driving the affordability out of the range for farmers, and that's one of the problems. The younger farmers getting in, any 100-acre farm is at least $1 million in Norfolk County. Who's got that money starting out? Nobody. All right, Mennonite families, they can work a 25-acre farm and produce real crops and real money from that. They just can't buy the million-dollar farms. So with those going up, like how are we going to address that? Because in Norfolk County, we can grow almost any crop there is and do it really, really well. So really the farm split, it doesn't make that much sense, to be honest, sometimes.
Through the chair, I would suggest to you that with the evaluation we've done in over 30% of the parcels being less than 20 hectares, that there is lots of opportunity for those that are starting out to purchase those smaller pieces and utilize them to get their feet under them, or if they're a specialty type of grower, like you mentioned, the Mennonite families, they can purchase those smaller pieces that exist now, rather than creating new ones that are smaller, which can cause more sterilization of the parcels. You've got less flexibility, and you've got perhaps parcels that are sterilized because they just can't get the big machinery in there when you start getting smaller parcels.
Now, has planning done a retail assessment of the small farms to see their availability in Norfolk County?
Through the chair, no.
No, because they don't last a week on the market. I think I've seen 3 in my neighborhood alone that weren't on the market for a week and sold for well over what we would consider market rates here, just so people can get their hands on that land, and it's going to make it really difficult for people. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To staff, Mary, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Height just said, so I certainly won't repeat it. And I also understand why you've proposed the wording you've proposed. So I want to be sure that I'm understanding the italicized text on pages 4 and 5 of your report, with the changes you've implemented by crossing out certain words, or what you're suggesting would be a way for us to allow smaller than 40-hectare parcel sizes to be created in a more flexible way than the previous wording. Is that correct?
Through the chair, the wording that is italicized is right out of the existing official
Correct,
plan,
okay.
with the track changes version that you currently have had presented to you a couple of weeks ago. So it's just showing you what's proposed by staff at this time.
Okay. All right, I understood the first part of that. So what's the significance of the words that have been, if you like, crossed out on pages 4 and 5? Is that would be new wording, i.e. removal of the word approximately, removal of the words will be economically viable, and addition of the words where all criteria, as on page 5 there, the second, third paragraph. Are those proposed wording changes, I guess, compared to what we presently have? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, those
Okay.
are proposed changes through the chair, proposed by the consultant to add some things like we had been talking with staff, for example, about the Farm Registration and Farm
Yes,
Organization
right.
Act, and the Property Assessment Class Tax Rate Program.
Yep.
So we thought that those should be added. In B, the top of page 5, there was, and it's crossed out there, applications for minor variance for relief of the minimum lot size shall not be considered minor in nature. So for example, we had one not that long ago that was 39.5 hectares, and we had to come through with a zoning amendment because that policy was here. So by changing it to what's there in the underlying text, that where those criteria are satisfied, a minor deviation can be approved through a minor variance. So that's providing more flexibility. The taking out of the word generally, no, the keeping of the word generally and taking out approximately is just because generally be approximately 4 hectares is kind of awkward. It's much more concise reading to say generally 40 hectares.
I'm agreeing with all of that, Mary, and thank you for that further explanation. The point, though, that I want to make, and I'll go back to paragraph B on page 5, and the fact that we would be requiring an applicant who wants to sever or I should say, create a parcel smaller than 40, and he or she would have to meet all of the criteria that you've outlined in section 4.2.4 as amended, including the inclusion of the farm tax registration, et cetera, et cetera. That's all good stuff. But given what you've told us in terms of the number of farm parcels within our county that are already significantly smaller than 40 hectares, that's the reality of farming in Norfolk County. And I agree with my colleague. I don't think we should be making life difficult for others that may want to create that size of a farm parcel. So my question specifically to you, Mary, on paragraph B on page 5, I'd like to see the word minor removed from those new lines. And it would then say, provided those criteria are outlined in section 4.2.4 are satisfied, a deviation from the minimum farm size may be approved through a minor variance. There's still a public process. Our Committee of Adjustment would be reviewing that process and that application on its merits, but it would not have to be what you've described as a minor. In other words, 0.5 of a hectare or 1 hectare off the 40. It could be more significant than what we typically think of as minor, given the reality of our farming. And I apologize for my back, Mr. Chairman, but that's my question to you, Mary, and to staff. Would you be comfortable with removal of that word minor in a deviation from the minimum farm size?
Through the chair, I think staff would like time to look at that and consider it. It's hard to commit tonight. Is it possible to take that under advisement, speak with you on the 18th when we have our meeting with you, to speak further on it at that point, if you're agreeable?
Mr. Chair, I personally would be agreeable to that. It is my hope that staff will agree with me and perhaps some others if they feel that way, that we would still protect what we're wanting to protect, but we would be making it not easier, but at least more realistic for applicants to create a parcel size. So I would be okay if that's just deferred till the 18th, but that's my request, Mr. Chairman, that word be removed in that case, because it's a significant word if it's left in. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments. Just with respect to viability, you know, a person could have a 100-acre farm, and someone else could have a 25-acre farm, and the 25-acre farm could be more viable than the 100 just because of the management and the soil and other attributes that are put to that parcel. Just in keeping with what Councillor Oliver's mentioning here. It's about management, because there are farms out there where the land is good, but maybe the operator isn't as good and it's not viable. So that should be kept in context. Now, with this report, I thought I read in here that if it was a specialty crop area, and we're not recommending specialty crop area, right? Even though the province may dictate it.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay.
Council is directed not
So,
to.
does it then, because would a specialty crop area permit smaller farm parcels, like in Niagara?
Through the chair, from what I've seen, those that have done the work on defining specialty crop area have then been able to look at a smaller parcel size. If they haven't done that, I haven't seen that, looking at a smaller size.
Okay, that's what I thought I read in the report, thanks. And there's been issues where there's a 200-acre parcel, and so that's two 40s, I guess, 80 hectares. And then a neighbor would like to purchase 50 acres off of that. And would say it's a 100-acre parcel and the neighbor wants to purchase 50 acres with 40 hectares and 20 hectares. Why would that not be permitted? Because they're not both 100-acre parcels. I know, because that's what you define as viability. But if you, why can't you go for a boundary adjustment? I've had people ask me about this where they'd like a boundary adjustment to pick up the retiring farmer's 50 acres and let the retiring farmer keep 50 acres.
Through the chair, it's taking me a minute to figure that one out, but Pam's coaching me here. I know we have not looked at that in a favorable situation in the past, but the description you're giving of it going from a farm to a farm certainly addresses the farm, keeping it in farming, keeping it in agricultural production. The way our policies read now, it has to be a minor or technical reason if you go to the part of the plan that talks about that. And so that section may need to be looked at for those types of situations.
So I know I've had that request in the past, and could we look at it a little closer to see if we can permit it? Because it's still all agriculture. We're talking about perhaps a smaller size to begin with, and then so that if the neighbor picks it up, he's more viable as an agricultural operation. Okay. And I'm looking at page 4 of 9 of the report, and it's under 424 ag lot sizes, and it's the II, and it talks about what you need, information pertaining to the scale and nature of the operation, projected revenue, expenses, financing, soil quality, water quality, and quantity, and any other viability criteria relevant to the proposal shall be provided to the satisfaction of the county, which is a good idea. And so you're basically looking for a business plan, I take it, by the applicant, and then that would go to the Ag Advisory Board or be reviewed by an agriculture consultant. Would you take into consideration off-farm income in that business plan?
Through the chair, I don't think that would be relevant to the situation because it's about the farm itself and the products from the farm.
Okay,
income
so you
from the
want it
farm.
to be wholly dependent on the farm operation. Thanks very much.
Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a motion for deferral of this on the floor?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll move that we defer to the 18th. That's what I heard from staff. Well, speaking with that, I would ask that staff send us the report prepared by Ashley Taylor, Norfolk County Official Plan Review, analyzing farm size and farm split policy in the A area so that we can further review that. And I'm not sure, I found this report somehow through Google, and I'm not sure, did our Agricultural Advisory Board ever see this? And if they did, what were their minutes or discussion about on this report?
Through the chair, I'm not quite sure whether Ashley would have taken it, but I know that when we brought the background report here, we brought that report and we brought the surplus farm. We brought all three of them here together last year. So I can send it out again, and I can check minutes to see if we discussed it at the Agriculture Advisory Board.
Okay, thank you. And further to Councillor Columbus thing, it's mentioned here, we had this talk the last time we discussed about this, is you're looking for a business plan from farmers for their new farming operations. Yet, we don't have anyone here qualified to analyze it. And right below it, number 3, the proposed farm and retained farm lot are eligible for farming business registration under farm registration and farm organizations. You must do a business plan to become registered with those guys. I don't know why we're adding that second layer of red tape and asking for it through the county, and we can't analyze it anyway, and then we're going to ask for a peer review on top of that. Just seems like a lot of hoops because you're not getting your OFA number unless you have a viable farm business.
Right.
Council, I have the good fortune, I'm going to use that word, of working for Lambton County for the last 5 years, 2 months, and it's been referenced several times today, that study. In 5 years and 2 months, I still didn't manage to pass, and this is the default issue, so I feel like I've come home again. What has to be kept top of mind, and let me suggest that this is a beautifully elegant mechanism proposed by planning that will allow Norfolk County not to dictate what the province wants, which is 40 hectares at a minimum. So Toronto, the wisdom there is that anything smaller than 40 isn't going to work ever. That's where they're at. And I'd also suggest, please keep in mind, that no matter what you pass, it's ultimately, this is just going to be council endorsement, and we're going to send it on to the provincial government for their approval, in fact. This is one of the very few things where the buck does not stop with you, although endorsement does. Okay, those things being said, the reason why this elegant solution works, why we effectively require that business plan, is to allow for the possibility to get to smaller than 40. So by doing that, and the reason why we can't consider off-farm income is because we're not really, it sounds terrible, but you're not only concerned with the people who own the property now, who say, I'm going to open up a greenhouse and I only need 8 hectares because I can make it small and I'm going to grow something worth a lot, et cetera, et cetera. It's for the future use. So that mechanism is, that sort of business plan, as you described, and I'd agree with that assessment, frankly, sir, allows for Norfolk County to have objective reason to approve something that otherwise we cannot approve. So it's really in the applicant's best interest. At any rate, who doesn't want to come up with a business plan if they're looking at a new venture? But it lets us do what otherwise the province of Ontario will not approve when we send this plan to them. And that's the nut that I learned in 5 years and change there. Like, we seem to have got to it almost right away. It's a beautiful thing. I love Norfolk.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Sonnenberg, and then we'll have, Councillor Height has made a motion, and then we'll have to deal with that. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. My question is, how is a specialty crop area determined?
It's my understanding through the chair that the province still has to come up with exact requirements for our procedures on how they're going to do that. They did come up to us in 2015, I think early in the spring, that they had draft ideas, and some of the municipalities have agreed to take a look at that. Niagara being one of them that have used the draft to come to what they currently have. We have chosen that we do not want to be one of the test municipalities to check out this. So that's as much as I know at this point.
Well, in my opinion, Norfolk County is probably the most diverse agricultural area in all of Canada. And if anybody deserves specialty crop rating, we do. And hence the ability for smaller farm sizes. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, hang on, Councillor Height. I'll get the clerk to read your motion, and then we'll go from there. It's Councillor Columbus.
It's just to reply to Councillor Sonnenberg, there's some concern at the Ag Advisory Board that if Norfolk was declared a specialty crop area, that there may be more regulations put in place by the province if it was designated specialty crop.
Okay. Go ahead.
Through the chair, moved by Councillor Height, that direction to staff respecting continuing the current official plan policy relative to minimum farm split parcel size be deferred until the special council meeting of May the 18th, 2017.
Further comments? Not? Those in favor? That is carried. So we're done with that one. Okay, so we're moving on to communications. Marlene Smith, Secretary, Port Rowan, South Walsingham Heritage Association, Bridge over Big Creek at Concession A. Move the motion to receive his information. Mayor Luke, or do you want to talk to this?
Well, I do want to talk to it, but you may want a motion first, I don't know.
That's okay, you go ahead, I'll put you
Well,
down.
I wanted to say that this was presented to me last, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and asked to put forward, and I just want a little background here. to council that it would have been 2 Fridays ago, there was a fire down in this area. And I had a phone call. I was in London at WWC meeting, and I got a phone call from a gentleman, a resident, who was not allowed to get to his home because the road was blocked off, and rightfully so. And from there, it seemed to have mushroomed this whole question of Concession A Bridge. And to be honest with you, I could not remember or recall what or when a decision was made as to what we were going to do. And if I have forgotten that, I do apologize. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I since have had this presented with concerns of closing this permanently, not repairing the bridge, and also a number of other inquiries that I said I would respond to. So, Mr. Chair, I guess I would put this out in the hopes that somebody can educate me as to what we're doing, and I already see staff's hand up, and I really, really appreciate that. But I was asked to put this on the agenda to be dealt with here publicly, and I am pleased to do that so I can get informed and see where we're going here. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak to this.
Okay. Do you want to add anything, Lee?
Through the chairman to council, I think that there was a combination of two things that occurred at the same time. As council is well aware, we are required, when we are undertaking certain work, to undertake a municipal class environmental assessment. The municipal class environmental assessment is the process that the county must go through to obtain approvals under the Environmental Protection Act. As part of that process, there is public consultation. It's a very long process that we go through. We end up with a file or a report at the end of the day. That report has a preferred solution as defined by the class environmental assessment. Once that process is completed, the file or the report is put out for 30 days of public viewing, at which time the public can request a Part 2 order from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. The notices were all sent out. At the same time that we were under the 30-day review period is when that house or the fire occurred in the area. So both of the things were happening at the same time. That prompted some phone calls, etc. And I think it became more heightened in everybody's awareness in the area. To be clear, council did not make a decision to close the bridge. Council has not directed staff to close the bridge. The class environmental assessment process is a process that ends up with a preferred solution at the end of the day. When I say a preferred solution, it does not necessarily mean that it is council's preferred solution. It is the preferred solution that allows us to obtain the approvals under the Environmental Protection Act. Once the 30-day review period is completed, and no Part 2 order requests have been received by the ministry, council is able to implement the preferred solution should they wish to do so. In this particular case, a letter was sent to the ministry with respect to the Part 2 order, as well as to staff. In addition to that particular letter, we received multiple other letters from the community, from various members of the community, with respect to this matter. As the process currently stands, it is with the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change. They will make a decision based on the letters that they have received to date. Once their decision has been decided, they will report back to county staff or through our consultant. At that point, we will have to comply with the direction from the ministry. Sometimes the ministry says the Part 2 order request is not justified and you need to take no further action. The file is deemed to be completed. Sometimes they ask for additional information from staff, and other times they issue a Part 2 order, which means we have to do a full environmental assessment under the Environmental Protection Act. At this time, there is nothing that council is not permitted to make a decision about the future outcome of the bridge at this time. They cannot do that because it predetermines the outcome of a class environmental assessment. So once staff have heard back from the minister or from the ministry, we'll be in a position to report back to council as to what the ministry has advised us to do, and that will outline the next steps. When we do that, we will bring forward the information for council to make a decision about how they wish to do that. Although the preferred solution today is to close that bridge, council does have the right and the ability to not implement the preferred solution from the class environmental assessment. However, it does mean that we're obligated to do a full-blown environmental assessment should council not wish to implement the preferred. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Luke.
Thank
Mayor Luke, sorry.
That's okay. So thank you, Lee, very much for that, because certainly I just got brought right up to speed on what has happened out there, because I had to say to these folks that I was corresponding with that I honestly do not remember council discussing this bridge or making a decision, and you've confirmed that. And we're going through a process. So I guess, Lee, to sum this up, and I've made quite a few notes here quickly, the end result as to whether this bridge will be closed, decommissioned, removed, replaced, a different form of bridge, etc., that ultimately will be the decision of this council, but that cannot even be discussed, so to speak, until we hear back from the government as to what their preferred decision is. Is that a fair statement, a way of putting it?
Through the chairman to council, yes. We are in a holding pattern until such time as we receive the decision from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change with respect to the letters that they have received. Once we have that information, and in my experience, it can be anywhere from 30 days to 180 days before we hear back from the ministry. At that point, staff will be in a position to be able to bring something forward for council to be able to make an informed decision as what the future outcome is going to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Lee, you just answered my second question on the time frame. So it could be up to 1 month to 6 months when this 30-day period is over.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I've had quite a few calls on this and emails and letters. And I guess one of the things that some of my constituents feel blindsided by this because it's recommending removal of the bridge. But we're under the impression that this was an approved capital project from, I don't know, quite a few years ago, 3-4 years ago, that this was an approved one. And I thought I saw it in the capital status project report as well. Is that incorrect?
Through the chairman to council, it is both correct and incorrect at the same time. There is an approved capital project to do something to the bridge. Staff were starting to work on the process with the approved capital money. In order to do anything to the bridge, we had to undertake a class environmental assessment. Through the class environmental assessment, what has come out of that is that the preferred solution is for the removal. So when the project was put into the capital budget, it was to start the process, not knowing what the outcome would be. The outcome has now been through the class environmental assessment. This is the outcome. Again, to stress, this is not what council must do. This is the process that allows us to get approvals through the Environmental Protection Act. Should council not wish to do this and they wish to do a different solution, we certainly have that avenue, and that will be presented in the report that we bring forward. This is simply part of the process that we're going through at this point. It is not a final decision that has been made by council at this point.
Okay, thank you for that. So during that process, was there any funds set aside for this project?
Through the chairman to council, there are some funds that have been set aside for this project. At this point, we don't not know if there's sufficient funds to do whatever work council deems necessary.
Do you have a rough idea on the amount of the funds?
I do not have that number handy. I'm sure we can get that information for you by tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you. Like one of the concerns that the residents have brought forward to me is that they're not looking for a superhighway bridge here. We're looking for a single lane bridge that can carry traffic such as fire trucks and such. So I know one of the correspondence we've had is from an engineer who obviously is quite knowledgeable about bridge building and such. And he had mentioned that there was a reduction recently in the specifications required by the province of Ontario for low-volume bridge, such as 200 cars or less per day, which this would qualify for. Will your department be looking at that as a solution as well?
Through the chairman to council, at this point, there is a bridge code in the Canadian Bridge Code, and all bridges have to be built to those specifications. Should council instruct staff to not do the preferred outcome through the class environmental assessment, we will have to complete an environmental assessment for council's direction, and at which point we would look at all available options, et cetera. But that, again, that'll be a decision for council to make once we have a ruling from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change with how we're permitted to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee, I do have a question, and you've given us a very thorough and complete explanation of where we are now and what the implications are. But I guess what I'm concerned about is that council is hearing, I think for the first time today, I believe, that the Class EA process is where it's at in its process, and that a preferred solution has been included in that Class EA, that being permanent removal of the dam. And to do otherwise is going to immediately cost more money, cause more time delays, and require it to be a full-blown EA, if I understood you correctly. Was there an, I won't say an error necessarily, but should this matter not have come to council at an earlier stage in the Class EA process so that we could have, should we have wanted to, influence where we're going before we got to this point? Like, I'm really concerned that it sounds like the neighbors knew that the recommended solution was to permanently remove it before we did, and that's not a good thing. And if that is in fact what's happened, then where did things fall off the rails such that council wasn't informed? And is there no way yet of backtracking on this, because we might very well want to go ahead with the capital of the project that we approved several years ago without subjecting ourselves to a full-blown EA? Sorry, that's a mouthful, but I think you get the essence of what I'm asking.
Through the chairman to council, I'm going to address the public knew about it before council did. There was actually a memo before that was all released to the public to council that was distributed to council. I believe it was part of the information packages to let everybody know that there were several Class EAs in various stages with respect to bridges, and we were going to be releasing this information, so that information was communicated. I can certainly recirculate that memo.
But did that information that was circulated say the preferred solution in this case is permanent removal?
Yes, it did.
It did?
It did. So that information was communicated in advance of that information. With respect to council's ability to influence the Class EA process, the process is specifically designed so that what council wants to do doesn't factor in to the process. That's why if you don't care for the preferred solution, you're not legally obligated to implement the preferred solution. We just have to do some other things to go along with it in order for council to be able to do that. Until we have the answer from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change with respect to their decision, I can't advise you on the cost to do the full complete Class EA. In my experience, I've done a full a full environmental assessment on a bridge, which are typically significantly less money than a lot of the other class environmental assessments that we've had to undertake for other things. I'm going to say it's not typically the most expensive EA available. It's typically one of the least expensive EAs, but should everything go with the ministry, we will certainly bring those types of costs back so council can make an informed decision at that point.
Thank you very much for that, Lee, and I guess I will publicly apologize that I didn't pay enough attention if in fact that information was circulated to us, and I would appreciate it being sent to me again if you don't mind. I don't know how many weeks or months ago it was, but somehow I missed that recommendation in there that this was to be permanently decommissioned, and I shouldn't have.
Well, after listening to what Lee has said, that we really don't have anything until we get back from whoever's got to do this, I guess. So I guess the best that we can do is just receive the the letters as information. Mayor Luke.
Mr. Chair, I would so move that. I certainly have some phone numbers and emails that I will respond to. I think that we should make a response to the Port Rowan South Walsingham Heritage Association and, of course, to Rochelle Boyd and to Marie Penner, if that could be done. I don't know. I see Lee again. I just not sure.
Lee?
Through the chairman to council, staff are already working on responses to all of those people. Should you have any correspondence that's not on the agenda tonight that staff may not have, please forward it to our attention and we'll certainly include them in our responses.
Mr. Chair, I will do that. And Lee, I never can seem to get ahead of you one step, so I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Clerk is busy writing, so I'm hoping she's got something that she can bring forward. You ready? Do you want a motion as far as the response, or just do it through staff?
Mr. Chair, information is fine. Staff have said that they
Okay.
will be
All right.
responding to the requests.
So we're taking the three correspondence as information at this time. That is, and I believe I had Councillor or Mayor Luke make that motion. Peter.
Mr. Chairman, just to let you know, as your representative on the Heritage Committee, all the bridges have come up and for discussion, and we've gone out and had a look at pretty well all the different bridges that have been closed. And I think there is a letter coming forward from the Heritage Committee and a recommendation for, I think, this Concession A bridge. Is there not, Melissa?
Through the chair, chair, Mary Cahill, she forwarded the committee's comments to the consultant. That was the requirement, and that's the route they took.
So anyway, just to let council know that the Heritage Committee is interested in this as well.
Councillor Columbus.
So to Councillor Black, so does the Norfolk Heritage Association decision, does it trump the Port Rowan South Walsingham Heritage Association's decision? Like what is the decision going to be of the Norfolk Heritage?
Well, the thing that trumps everybody is this council.
Good, I'm glad to hear that.
That's you, Mr. Columbus.
Okay, all those in favor? We are going to take a 10-minute break. Then we're going to get into other business, I guess.